A geopolitical shockwave has just struck North America, one that's testing the strength of U.S. Canada relations like never before. In a move, Canada has introduced aggressive tolls and travel restrictions on the Alaska Highway, the only major land route connecting the continental U.S. to Alaska. The move, described by insiders as deliberate and calculated, has left Washington blindsided. President Trump is reportedly furious, scrambling to respond. But this isn't just a story about toll booths and permits. It's a strategic escalation with real consequences. The new restrictions are already disrupting supply chains, spiking prices for Alaskans, and raising serious questions about treaty violations and diplomatic intent. Experts say this could mark the most serious rupture in North American cooperation in decades. So what happens when a close ally turns a key infrastructure route into a pressure point? And what does it reveal about the shifting balance of power on the continent? Stick with us as we unpack the economic, political, and security fallout from this bold Canadian move, and what it could mean for the future of U.S. diplomacy. The Alaska Highway, from lifeline to leverage. At the center of this escalating standoff is a road most Americans rarely think about, the Alaska Highway. Built in 1942 as a wartime necessity and later formalized through a 1977 treaty between the U.S. and Canada, this 1,390-mile stretch runs from British Columbia through the Yukon and into Alaska. It's more than just pavement, it's Alaska's only land link to the rest of the United States. For decades, the highway stood as a symbol of North American cooperation, but that symbol just got weaponized. Canada's new policy includes multi-point toll checkpoints, steep permit requirements, and stricter vehicle inspections along the route. Officials frame it as a regulatory update tied to infrastructure upkeep and environmental protection, but U.S. analysts and legal experts are calling it something else entirely: a breach of treaty obligations and a form of economic retaliation. The impact was immediate. Grocery and fuel prices in Alaska began to spike within days. Small towns along the corridor, dependent on road-based tourism and cross-border commerce, reported sharp drops in traffic. Trucking companies rerouted or stalled, faced with unpredictable wait times and rising costs. For a state that already pays more for basic goods, these new hurdles are more than an inconvenience. They represent a logistical chokehold. This isn't just red tape, it's leverage, and it's hitting at a moment when U.S. supply chains are already fragile from years of tariff wars, pandemic aftershocks, and rising energy costs. By turning a crucial transport artery into a pressure valve, Canada is sending a message. Economic retaliation can be physical, not just fiscal. If geography was once an advantage for U.S. dominance in the region, it's now being used against it. But this is only the first move, because what's really at stake here isn't just a highway, it's how infrastructure gets weaponized in a new era of economic pushback. Alaska's infrastructure, vulnerability exposed. Canada's toll crackdown didn't just tighten a border, it exposed just how fragile Alaska's lifelines really are. With the Alaska Highway restricted, the state is left with two flawed options: the sea and the sky. Maritime routes along Alaska's rugged coast are long, treacherous, and seasonal. Winter ice, volatile weather, and limited port infrastructure make shipping slow and risky. For rural areas, it's often not an option at all. Air travel picks up some of the slack, but it's a costly and inefficient alternative for bulk goods. Most cargo flights depend on stable fuel prices and international overflight permissions, both of which are now in question. If Ottawa wanted to reveal just how reliant Alaska is on smooth Canada-US logistics, it succeeded. The timing couldn't be worse for Alaska's tourism industry, a key economic pillar. Summer usually brings a wave of RVers, road trippers, and bus tours traveling the scenic highway through British Columbia and the Yukon. Now, cancellations are pouring in. Car rental companies and hospitality businesses across the state report sharp drops in bookings. Small towns that thrive on cross-border foot traffic are watching their seasonal income vanish. And it's not just tourists who are staying away. The highway carried medical supplies, farming equipment, and essential goods to communities spread across Alaska's vast interior. Now, businesses are facing supply delays, rising prices, and a deep sense of uncertainty. Trucking firms trying to detour around Canada's bottlenecks are finding few workable solutions. Some are even pausing deliveries altogether. Alaska isn't cut off from America, one analyst noted. It's being priced out of it. The effect is psychological as much as economic. The idea that an entire US state can be so easily boxed in by a foreign policy shift is raising alarms, not just in Alaska, but across federal agencies. It's a vulnerability few in Washington had taken seriously, until now. And the message from Ottawa is impossible to miss. You can't treat trade partners as disposable and expect critical cooperation to continue unchallenged. Because this rupture isn't just an Alaskan issue, it's the opening shot in a broader economic confrontation. Trade war, the background. This latest standoff didn't appear out of thin air. It's the result of a slow-burning trade war that's been simmering for years. During Trump's first term, the US imposed steep tariffs on Canadian aluminum and steel, invoking national security concerns under Section 232. The move blindsided Ottawa. Not only was Canada one of America's closest allies, but its aluminum exports were also deeply embedded in US manufacturing. Still, Washington framed it as necessary, a bold step to protect American industry from what Trump called unfair global dumping. Canada fired back quickly. In a proportional countermeasure, Ottawa imposed tariffs on US goods ranging from whiskey and orange juice to steel and farm equipment. It was the first major sign that Canada wouldn't absorb economic punches without throwing some of its own. Though the public rhetoric remained civil, the underlying trust between the two countries started to erode. Fast forward to Trump's second term, and tensions have only escalated. His administration has doubled down on protectionist policies, expanding tariffs, and calling out what it sees as Canada's trade imbalances. Ottawa, in turn, has taken a more confrontational stance, targeting not just products, but infrastructure. That's where Alaska comes in. By tightening the Alaska Highway, Canada isn't just tweaking tolls, it's using geography as leverage, highlighting how deeply US commerce depends on international cooperation, even with its neighbors. This is a calculated power play. Rather than strike back with more tariffs, Canada is flexing its logistical muscle, using a vital land corridor as a pressure point. It's a shift from economic tit-for-tat to strategic disruption, and for years, Canada played the role of the reliable partner, but as Trump continues to challenge long-standing trade norms, Ottawa is signaling that it has tools of its own and isn't afraid to use them. And now the trade war isn't just hitting balance sheets, it's hitting roads, borders, and entire regions. This is no longer just about aluminum or soybeans. It's a contest of control over routes, resources, and rules. The question is no longer whether the US can win a trade war, it's whether it can afford the cost of fighting one with its closest ally. The US response: Trump's tough choices. President Trump's trade doctrine has always been about leverage. Under the banner of America First, he's pursued an aggressive, unapologetic strategy aimed at reshaping global trade relationships. His message is clear: the US will no longer tolerate what he calls unfair deals, even if it means burning bridges with longtime allies. But this approach comes with consequences, and they're beginning to add up. American industries are feeling the pressure. Rising tariffs and retaliatory measures from trading partners have pushed up the cost of raw materials, especially steel and aluminum. Automakers have reported layoffs and factory closures. Construction firms and manufacturers are seeing their input costs soar. For many, these policies have disrupted long-term contracts and introduced a level of unpredictability that makes investment risky. Inflation is another growing concern. As tariffs filter down through the supply chain, consumers are paying more for goods ranging from groceries to electronics. Small businesses and farmers, once a core part of Trump's base, are being squeezed the hardest. With falling export demand and rising input costs, many are watching their margins evaporate. Trump's administration insists the short-term pain is a necessary sacrifice for long-term gain. Officials argue that reclaiming control over trade is worth the temporary instability, but public patience is wearing thin. Polls show growing dissatisfaction among voters, particularly in rural states that depend on exports. These communities are caught in the crossfire, bearing the brunt of policies designed to punish foreign competitors. Meanwhile, allies are reassessing their positions. Canada, traditionally one of the US's most stable partners, is now demonstrating that friendship doesn't mean submission. Its move to restrict access to Alaska is a clear signal that the old playbook, where America acts and others adjust, is being challenged. Trump faces a difficult choice: escalate and risk deeper isolation, or recalibrate and seek common ground. His administration must now confront not only the economic fallout, but the diplomatic consequences of alienating allies. This isn't just a test of trade tactics, it's a test of leadership in a global system that's becoming less forgiving. And as the world watches, the future of North American unity hangs in the balance. Global implications, Canada's bold move, and the bigger picture. When Canada shuts a gate to Alaska, the world takes notice, not because of the road, but because of what it signals. This isn't just a regional dispute, it's a statement. A G7 nation is willing to leverage geography and infrastructure to push back against US pressure. That message is echoing far beyond North America's borders. The ripple effect is already being felt. Countries across the global south are watching closely. For nations like China, Russia, Brazil, and India, members of the expanding BRICS bloc, Canada's move underscores the limits of American influence, even among its closest allies. They see an opening. If US allies are starting to resist, then the time may be ripe for alternative power centers to solidify. China, in particular, has been quietly advocating for a world less dependent on Washington's rules. It's pushing for trade settlements in yuan, expanding diplomatic ties in Latin America and Africa, and coordinating more closely with countries feeling the sting of US tariffs. Canada's shift is not lost on them, it's encouragement. Meanwhile, the Gulf powers are reevaluating their energy deals. Nations like Saudi Arabia and the UAE are less willing to price oil exclusively in dollars. As trust in US stability declines, long-standing assumptions in global markets are breaking down. Japan and South Korea, key US allies, now face tough decisions: align with an increasingly unpredictable Washington or hedge their bets through economic diversification. Even Europe is growing cautious. While still tethered to NATO and the US economically, leaders in Berlin, Paris, and Brussels are balancing strategic autonomy with diplomatic necessity. Canada's bold play suggests that breaking ranks with Washington may no longer be unthinkable, even for Western democracies. In this shifting landscape, Canada's decision isn't just a policy, it's a precedent. And at the center of it all is Donald Trump. His trade war, his rhetoric, and his polarizing leadership have pushed even allies to reconsider the cost of American alignment. The world is moving, and the United States may find itself more isolated than ever, because when one gate closes, others may open, and not all of them lead back to Washington. Trump's gamble, strategy, or miscalculation? Donald Trump didn't start this fire to keep things steady. He lit it to reshape the game. From the start, his administration framed the trade war as a necessary course correction. To Trump, the old system was rigged against American workers, and bold disruption was the only path to restoring US economic dominance. Tariffs weren't just policy, they were leverage. But now, as Canada's retaliation cuts deep and global alliances fray, that strategy is under fire from within. Washington is divided. Trade hawks in Trump's inner circle insist this is the pressure needed to bring foreign partners to heel. But market realists, economists, and even longtime Republican allies warn that the economic pain is beginning to outweigh the political gains. Manufacturing job losses, price hikes, and investor uncertainty are becoming harder to ignore. The gamble is getting expensive. Even Trump's closest allies are showing signs of fatigue. Senators from agricultural states, business lobbies, and energy leaders, many of whom once supported Trump's confrontational style, are now questioning how long this can last. How much more strain can American industries absorb before the system cracks? The big question is no longer about tariffs or tolls, it's about legacy. Is Trump's hardline trade agenda a bold strategy to reset global norms, or a miscalculation that's isolating the United States from the very world it seeks to lead? With the world watching and allies hesitating, the weight of this decision is growing. Canada's move to choke Alaska's land access isn't just a retaliation, it's a warning. The costs are no longer theoretical. They're on the ground, in the economy, and on the table. Because when even your friends start drawing lines, you have to ask, who's still standing with you? The clock is ticking, and the next move may decide the future of US power. The future of US-Canada relations, is there a way back? This conflict is no longer just about tariffs or toll roads. It's about how nations adapt when long-standing alliances are tested by shifting priorities and rising economic nationalism. What's happening between the US and Canada is a case study in 21st century diplomacy, where geography, trade, and politics collide in real time. The United States now stands at a crossroads. Double down on protectionism and risk deeper isolation, or recalibrate and work toward restoring trust with its closest ally. Canada's move wasn't just retaliation, it was a signal that even longtime partners will assert their leverage when pushed too far. The stakes are higher than ever. Alaska's isolation is just one visible symptom of a deeper fracture. If North America, arguably the most integrated economic region in the world, can splinter, what does that say about the stability of global trade as a whole? Can the US afford to stand alone in a world defined by interdependence? Or is this the new normal, where loyalty is transactional and power is redefined by who can hold the line the longest?